If you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
State your name, please,
Herman Hall.
and how are you employed?
I'm a detective with the Office of the Attorney General, Department of Criminal Investigations.
And how long have you been with Office of Attorney General?
11 years.
And prior to that, how were you employed?
I was employed with the Kentucky State Police for 24 and a half years.
Well, how many years total in law enforcement?
35, 36.
And in 2020, you were employed by the Office of Attorney General as detective.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you, were you assigned to be involved in the investigation of the shooting that occurred on March 13, 2020 at 3003 Springfield Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
As part of your investigation, did you conduct an interview with Mr. Aaron Sarpe?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And when was that interview?
It was June the 26th of 2020, and the time was right at 11 o'clock a.m.
And where was that interview conducted?
It was conducted at our office in Louisville, 310 Whittington Parkway.
So it was an in-person interview.
Yes, ma'am.
And during that interview, did you ask Mr. Sarpe if when he was inside apartment 8 and heard banging or knocking, if he heard any words being said, such as "it's the police" or "it's the cops"?
Several times, yes, ma'am.
And how did he respond?
He responded that he did hear the knocking and police.
And you did record that interview?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you reviewed that recording?
I've reviewed parts of it, yes, ma'am.
And that part where he indicated that he did hear the knocking and announcing of police?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's a fair and accurate depiction of the interview, that portion of the interview.
It is.
So at this time, we'd move to play that recording, which would be Commonwealth's Exhibit 148.
No objection.
All right, it will be so admitted.
Come on, downstairs, I just heard police. Then when I came outside, then the guy wanted to leave. And the guy said, "Oh, go back inside. So when I went back inside, it didn't take that long. Well, it went off.
Okay, so before you opened the door to leave, you heard somebody say police, police.
Yeah, they said police.
Did you hear any knocking or anything?
I'm not sure, but it been so long.
Yeah, and could you tell what direction
Police
the
were.
person was saying police, police? Did you know where he was at?
Okay. If you walk in that apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this, and this, on the step, that on the, is the apartment complex.
Yes,
There's
sir.
another apartment this way, there's another apartment this way. The police, they were on the wall like this, going to the apartment, because they were going tactical.
Can you pause it for a moment,
Sure.
please?
They're not ready.
Pause it. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Can I get another notepad? Sorry.
I think another legal pad is what she said.
Sorry.
If you walk in that apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this, and this, on the step, that on the, is the apartment complex.
Yes,
There's
sir.
another apartment this way, there's another apartment this way. The police, they were on the wall like this, going to the apartment, because they were going tactical, elect.
Sure.
They're not ready because they don't know what was going on. So, and someone opened the door. That's the time I got, go inside. Boy, they were in flat vest
Yeah.
with the police.
Sure.
Yeah.
So they had the police vest on, they had the police on the front and stuff, and you heard them before you opened the door?
Yeah,
So the door was closed,
yeah, door closed.
and you could hear them saying, police,
Yeah,
police?
because the apartment complex, the door right there, and my daughter stuff up on the table. I'm getting ready to go.
Sure.
Soon when I open the door, that's it.
And that's when they told you to get back
Yeah,
inside?
back inside.
Did you have a conversation other than,
No.
And so that was the part of that interview where you asked him several times about hearing before he opened the door,
Yes, ma'am.
hearing the announcement of police, police.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, during the course of your investigation, at some point was the evidence that had been collected by the Louisville Metro Police Public Integrity Crime Scene Unit, was that evidence all turned over to the Office of Attorney General Investigative Section?
Yes, ma'am.
And then at point after that, was all of the evidence turned over to the FBI?
I believe there might have been a cell phone that wasn't, but everything else was released to the FBI.
And what date was that?
Oh, gosh.
If you need to look at a supplement,
Yes, ma'am.
verify that.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you. That was Thursday, June the 25th of 2020, in 2020.
I believe that's the initial obtaining of the evidence. And on the bottom paragraph, I believe it says June 30th.
Oh, that was released to the FBI on June the 30th.
Okay, so everything was released to the FBI on June 30th, 2020?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Any questions of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Detective Hall, at the interview that you conducted with Aaron Sarpe on June 26, 2020, did he turn over any property to you?
Yes, sir, he did.
What was that?
It was a rifle casing.
What type of rifle casing?
I don't know the caliber. I couldn't determine the caliber of the rifle casing, but I did collect it and store it as evidence, and it was released to the FBI also.
On that June 30th, when everything else was?
Yes, sir.
And did you learn where he obtained that casing?
According to his statement, he got that from some hardscape or landscape rocks out front of the apartment.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Sarpe told you that during his interview on June 26th.
Yes, ma'am.
And then did you ask him, did he have it with him that day?
He did, yes, ma'am.
And so you asked him to give it to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you tell what kind of casing it was?
It was rifle casing. I couldn't tell the caliber.
And he told you he found it outside in the gravel or the landscaping area
Yes, ma'am.
in the vicinity of where he had parked his Sequoia.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you, along with, you put it in evidence at the Office of Attorney General,
Yes, ma'am.
and then it was included in all the evidence that was turned over to the FBI.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing further?
Did he say when he found it?
He wasn't really specific on the date that he found it. Just while he was picking up his daughter one day, he just found the rifle casing in the landscape rocks and picked it up.
All right, you can step down. Thank you. Your next witness?
Commonwealth calls Stephen Hughes.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And you may remove your mask while you're testifying if you wish, but you're not required to.
State your name, please.
Stephen Hughes.
And how are you employed?
I work for the Kentucky State Police Forensic Laboratory System, and I work at our Jefferson Regional Laboratory here in Louisville.
And what is your position there?
My job title is a Forensic Scientist Specialist 2, and my area of specialty is firearms and tool mark identification.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been continuously employed by the Kentucky State Police since September 2004, so just over 17 years.
What is your educational background?
I received my degree, Bachelor of Science degree in criminology from the University of Louisville in May of 2004.
And have you received training in the field of firearms examination?
Yes, when I was hired in September 2004, it was as a firearms and tool mark examiner trainee. I entered into an apprenticeship-style training program, and for firearms and tool mark examiners, it's a minimum of 2 years on-the-job training underneath a qualified firearms and tool mark examiner. During my training with the Kentucky State Police, I was also one of 12 firearm and tool mark examiner trainees selected to attend the ATF's National Firearms Examiner Academy. This is an annual academy hosted by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, where they sent me training work to do at the State Police Laboratory, as well as about 5.5 months training at the ATF laboratory in Washington, D.C. I graduated from that academy in September of 2006 and completed the rest of the training required by Kentucky State Police in March of 2007, and from that point was qualified to work firearms cases.
And since you began doing firearms examinations, can you estimate how many you have conducted in the 17 years?
Case-wise, probably in the thousands. Individual bullet-to-bullet or casing-to-casing, including training, would probably be in the tens of thousands.
And have you testified as an expert witness in the field of firearms examination?
Yes, I have.
And a number of times?
I haven't kept track, but probably estimate over 40, 50 times maybe.
The
Judge, I will stipulate Mr. Hughes' expertise.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Now, your lab is a Kentucky State Police lab. Where is the central lab for Kentucky State Police?
The central laboratory is in Frankfort, Kentucky.
And there are regional labs.
Yes, our laboratory here in Louisville is one of those regional laboratories.
Were certain items submitted to you at your lab here in Louisville by Louisville Metro Police for analysis in this case?
Yes.
And did those items include a number of bullets, bullet casings, and firearms.
Yes, there are several bullets, fired cartridge casings, and firearms.
Now, specifically, and if you want to refer to your report, feel free to do that, was an item, a gun that was labeled by your lab as item 1 submitted.
Yes,
And that, what was a pistol? What kind of pistol was that?
so that item is a Glock brand 40 Smith & Wesson caliber semi-automatic pistol, model 22, generation 4. Serial number was LMPD 0256.
You may.
Mr. Hughes, I'm handing you this, known as a Ziploc box. You're familiar with that type of
Yes.
box?
Mhm.
You would open that, and if you would verify that the serial number on the pistol in the box is the same serial number on the Glock 40 caliber Model 22 that you just testified that you examined.
Yes, the slide of the pistol is slightly locked back and it is unloaded. Serial number here is LMPD 0256, which is the same serial number as the pistol in my report. This is the pistol that I examined.
So if you would hold that up and show it to the jury.
Mhm.
And there are 3 magazines included in that Ziploc box.
Yes, there are.
Okay. So you can go ahead and set it down. Now, that particular pistol, you said it's a 40 caliber manufactured by Glock.
Yes.
Did you, to begin with, did you examine the gun to see if it was functional?
Yes, whenever any firearm comes into the laboratory, it goes through a series of checks to see if it is functional and if it is safe to test fire. This includes checking the barrel to ensure it's unobstructed, checking to see if the action will cycle in a semi-automatic pistol when you pull the slide back and release it, see if it cocks the internal firing pin in this gun, and pulling the trigger does release that striker. All these checks for this pistol, I found it to be functioning properly and would have been, and was safe to test fire.
Did you, on the 3 magazines that were included, did you utilize those to see if they functioned in the gun itself?
Yes, I checked each of those, found that they would each lock into the pistol and would lock the slide back on an empty chamber with no ammunition left in the magazine. And I utilized the 1 magazine listed as laboratory item 2 during my test firing of the firearm.
So you actually used one of those magazines for your test firing?
Yes, I did.
The, that particular gun, what kind of class characteristics does it have? And would you explain what class characteristics are?
Class characteristics are design features of the gun that are selected by the manufacturer. In the case of this pistol, it includes things like its caliber, 40 Smith & Wesson, the shape of the firing pin, which in this case is an elliptical shape, the firing pin aperture shape, which is rectangular, that's the hole the firing pin travels through to strike the primer on the back of a cartridge. The rifling type in the barrel is a class characteristic. In this case, it is called polygonal type rifling, which is slightly different than your conventional rifling. Polygonal, it's more hills and valleys, as opposed to hard-edged lands and grooves. And the number of those hills and valleys and the twist, which is 6 hills and valleys with a right-hand twist within the barrel. Those are all the class characteristics of this pistol.
So when the bullet is discharged through the barrel, there's a right-hand polygonal twist going on inside the barrel.
Yes, what rifling is in a barrel, in this case the type being polygonal, it grabs and engages the bullet and starts to put a spin on it. What this does is putting that spin on the bullet makes it more accurate in flight. It's very similar to when a quarterback throws a football, they put a spin on the football to make it their pass more accurate. Kind of the same thing with the gun, the barrel putting a spin on a bullet. And that rifling grabs and engages the bullet to put that spin on it.
Okay. Now, in regard to, you said you did some, why did you do test fires?
I test firearms so that I can have known test standards, known bullets, and known cartridge casings that I know I fired in this firearm, so that I can then compare those in the laboratory to any fired evidence that was submitted for comparison to it.
Now, concerning the, you were given a group of 10 casings in the evidence submitted by Louisville Metro Police, which had been retrieved from the scene at apartment 4. From that entire scene. The 10 casings numbered according to your lab numbers would begin with lab number 11. You have that there?
Yes.
And those, your lab numbers compare to the Louisville Metro Police numbers. And so I want to go through each one of those casings. First of all, your lab number 11,
Yeah.
which is, what is that item?
That is one fired .40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge casing, and the submitting agency LMPD item number for that would be item 23.
And that has been already testified about and photographs admitted that that is also equal to marker 1, the shell casing from the parking lot. Now, what is item number 12 on your report?
12 is the same. It's one fired .40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge casing, LMPD item number 25.
Which is also marker 3, a shell casing from the parking lot. What is KSP lab item number 13?
It is the same one fired .40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge casing, LMPD item number 26.
Equals marker number 4, another shell casing from the parking lot.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Okay.
Judge, we are willing to stipulate that these 10 casings are found in the parking lot, so we don't have to go through one at a time.
I want to equate them to the marker numbers so that we can have that frame of reference as to where they were. Item 14, is that another 40 caliber
Yes, another
casing?
40 caliber casing, LMPD item number 27.
That is also marker 5. Item 15,
And the same, fired .40 caliber cartridge casing, LMPD item number 28.
and that would be marker 6, also parking lot. Item 16,
Same fired 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge casing, LMPD item number 29.
And 17, that was marker 7. Item 17,
The same fired 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge casing, LMPD item number 30.
and that's marker 8. Item 18,
Same 40 caliber cartridge casing, LMPD item number 31.
and that is marker 9, which the jury has heard was found under the tire of the Roto-Rooter van. Item number 19,
Same fired 40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge casing, LMPD item number 32.
and that would be marker number 10, also in the parking lot. Finally, the 10th casing, item number 55.
Lab item 55, one fired 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge casing, LMPD item number 87.
And as has been testified, that item did not have a marker number as it was found underneath a van parked in the lot. Now, you tested all 10 of these casings to determine if they were in fact fired from this gun.
Yes, in the laboratory, I use what's called a comparison microscope. It's like two microscopes side by side, joined via an optical bridge with one set of eyepieces that I can look through. And I can compare one item to another. It's got a dividing line down the middle. And what I'm looking at is the microscopic markings left on these fired cartridge casings. I'll take the test standards that I know I fired in the pistol first, and I'll compare those to one another so I can see what patterns of these microscopic markings the gun is reproducing consistently on multiple fired cartridge casings. Then I will compare my test standard to any other items of evidence that were submitted for comparison. And in this case, I compared these 10 casings to my test standards that I fired in this gun. And I found a significant agreement of individual characteristics within the firing pin impressions and firing pin aperture shear markings, and identified them as having been fired in this pistol.
So you call that making an identification.
Yes,
And the conclusion is that those casings found in the parking lot were fired from this gun.
yes.
Now, did you also test some bullets that had been retrieved by the Louisville Metro Police
Yes, I
to
did.
compare and determine whether they were fired from this gun?
Yes, I did.
So the first one I would ask you about is your lab number 9, item 9.
Yes, laboratory item 9, one bullet, LMPD item number 21.
Which has been testified was a bullet found on the dining room table in apartment 3. And the next item would be your item 10,
Item 10, one bullet, LMPD item number 22.
which has been testified was a bullet found on the floor and seen in a photograph on the floor by the sliding door in apartment 3. Next would be item 52.
Lab item 52, one bullet is LMPD item number 82.
And that has been seen in photographs as LMP, as the bullet without a marker, but that was found in a soap dish in the bathroom. Next, item 53.
Lab item 53, one bullet is LMPD item number 83.
And that has been testified and seen in a photograph that was retrieved from top of the furnace in a utility closet in apartment 4. Now, how did you test these 4 bullets to determine whether they've been fired from this gun?
Similarly with the cartridge casings, I used the comparison microscope. This time, looking at my test bullets that I know I fired in the gun, comparing them to one another to see what pattern of markings was left on the side of them by the rifling of the barrel when they were fired, and then comparing my test standards to these 4 fired bullets. And what I found was unique stria pattern from the hills, hill impressions of the rifling that matched up with my test standards from these 4 bullets, and I identified them as having been fired from this firearm.
When you say hill impressions, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so the hills, they're the high spots in the barrel that impress into the sides of the bullet to engage it, to put that spin on it as the bullet's fired and forced down the barrel. Microscopic imperfections within the barrel will leave scratches or striations down the side of the bullet in these hill impressions as it is forced down the barrel of the gun. And it's looking at the microscopic scratches left on the sides of the bullets, comparing one to another on my microscope is what I'm looking at to see if I see that same pattern of scratches that I do on my tests as to the fired bullets.
So each gun has a unique way of leaving these microscopic markings?
Yes, there are microscopic imperfections incidental to the manufacturing process within the barrel of firearms, even within the barrel of this firearm, which I verified by producing a silicone barrel cast, extracting it, and microscopically examining that to find microscopic imperfections not running parallel with the rifling that these bullets are scraping against as they travel down the barrel.
And you made an identification of these 4 bullets that they were fired in this gun?
Yes, I did.
There was a fifth bullet that was submitted to you, item 49.
Laboratory item 49, a bullet, LMPD item number 79.
And that would be marker 47, a bullet from the top dresser drawer of the south bedroom in apartment 4. Were you able to make an identification on that particular bullet?
With that bullet, I was not able to identify or eliminate it as having been fired from this pistol.
Okay. You did the same comparison as you did with the other ones?
Yes, I performed the same comparison, comparing it to my known test standards that I fired from this gun, but I didn't see the same level of correspondence that I did between it and my test standards as I did the other bullets. All of those class characteristics were the same. The caliber, a .40 caliber class, 6 polygonal hills and valleys with a right-hand twist. But I did not see those microscopic stria pattern quite the same. It didn't line up as well as it did on the other ones, so it was inconclusive.
Okay. Now, turning to another examination you did on another gun that was submitted to you, item 45, and it would be another report, I believe, report, or case number 20J 1677, report 3.
Report 3. Okay.
Now, referring to that report, what is item 45?
Item 45 is a Glock brand 9mm Luger caliber semi-automatic pistol, model 43X, serial number BLLF733.
Which has previously been testified about and photographs shown to be the gun found under the bed in the south bedroom of apartment 4. Was a cartridge casing submitted to you to compare, to determine if that casing was fired from this gun or not that gun, from the 9mm,
Yes, was.
and that was item 43.
Yes, item 43 of that lab number, LMPD item 70, is one fired 9mm Luger cartridge casing.
And that has been testified, was retrieved from the hallway of apartment 4. What did you determine in regard to whether the 9mm casing was fired from that Glock 9mm pistol?
I was able to identify that cartridge casing as having been fired in that Glock pistol. Did the same examinations as I previously described by test firing that pistol in our laboratory firing range, getting known cartridge casings that I knew I fired in the gun, examining them on my comparison microscope first, and then comparing the fired casing submitted for comparison, and I found the same pattern of individual characteristics within the firing pin aperture shear markings of that casing that I did on my test fires. I used that to determine that it was fired in that pistol.
Okay. Referring you back to item 1, the .40 caliber Glock. The way that gun is fired, does it have a double action or a single action? If you can explain how that works with pulling the trigger.
Okay, when you would pull the slide back and release it to chamber a cartridge, the tail of the striker engages on the back of what's called sometimes the cross, or back of the trigger bar within, or the sear within this firearm. And as you pull the trigger, the striker gets cocked rearward, and then that sear drops down at a certain point, and the firing pin is released to travel forward through the breech and strike the primer on the back of a cartridge casing, which detonates the primer, ignites the gunpowder, which fires the gun, forces the bullet out of the barrel. It's a semi-automatic pistol, so when it's fired, the extractor and the slide will move rearward. It'll automatically extract that fired casing, and ejector will eject the casing out of the gun. And if there's any ammunition left in the magazine, it will automatically load another cartridge from the magazine into the chamber, and then the gun is ready to be fired again with a subsequent trigger pull.
So a semi-automatic doesn't mean that it's going to automatically, you have to still pull the trigger each time?
Yes, it is one trigger pull is one shot. You have to pull the trigger each time you want to fire a shot.
And you said the casing is ejected.
Yes.
And is there a particular direction the casing would be ejected in?
The ejection port on a Glock is kind of on the top and right-hand side.
Could you hold it up and point out where the casing would be ejected?
The cutout in the slide here, there's the piece called the extractor right here on the side, and an ejector is within here, and it's kind of angled, and typically when casings are ejected, when this travels all the way back, they get ejected up and out to the side, right-hand side of the pistol. It may not always be the case depending on how you're holding the firearm or what type of ammunition you're using, but typically they would be extracted and ejected up and to the right.
Up and to the right. And what would determine how far the casing would, like how many feet or how far the casing would travel after being ejected?
It could be any amount of distance. Some guns will drop them at your feet, some will eject them a long ways off. It's kind of determined by how you're holding the pistol, what kind of ammunition you're using, and how it's made or designed.
Okay, in this particular case with the .40 caliber ammunition and that Glock Model 22, do you know how far the casings might be ejected?
I do not. I did not perform any ejection pattern testing with this firearm.
Okay. If the shooter is standing in one place, would you expect the casings to be ejected in the same general area?
You can expect that, but it's not always the case. It can vary firearm to firearm.
But that gun would not eject to the left.
I wouldn't expect it to, but again, I didn't do any testing regarding the ejection pattern of this firearm, so I can't conclusively say.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Cross-examination?
No questions.
All right, you can step down, thank you. The Commonwealth's next witness.
The Commonwealth calls Bryce Ziegler.
I'm sorry.
It said Bryce Ziegler.
Sorry.
Actually,
He's in
we'll
the
go
one
ahead.
he called. Okay.
We'll wait on Bryce Ziegler.
All right, so do you want her to remain? Miss Whaley, do you want her to remain?
I'm sorry.
Do you want her to remain?
Yes.
All right, sorry.
He's in the lobby.
We'll go ahead with Ms. Jones.
All right, if you'll go ahead and take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, and if you wish to take your mask off while you're testifying, you may. You're not required to.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Would you please go ahead and state your name for the record?
Special Agent Casey Jones.
And where do you work?
I'm with the FBI, and I work out of the Lexington office.
Okay. And for FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you worked with the FBI?
It'll be 14 years in April.
Okay. And what sort of training did you receive to become an agent with the FBI?
Back in 2008, I attended the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, which at the time was approximately 22 weeks. And then I was assigned to the FBI Louisville field office.
Okay. How long have you been an FBI agent strictly in Louisville, Lexington, things like that?
I served about 6.5 years here in the Louisville office, and then I went to our headquarters where I worked in the counterterrorism division, and then when I came back, I was assigned to the Lexington FBI office. So I've been in Lexington for about 5 years.
Okay. And do you have a certain type of unit or role that you're assigned to in that office?
Yes, in Lexington, I'm assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, but I'm also a member of our evidence response team. It's an ancillary duty.
Okay. As an evidence response member, what do you all perform task-wise?
We assist with searches or crime scenes where we will assist with processing a crime scene and collecting and packaging evidence.
Okay. And when you were with that unit, did you perform a call-out, or I guess a site back in June of 2020 to 3003 Springfield Drive here in Louisville, Kentucky?
Yes, I did.
And was your role with the evidence response team?
Yes.
Can you just go through the response that you all provided, and then I'll get a little bit more detailed in a second?
So on the search took place on June 19th and 20th. I was not present for the first day of the search. I know just from looking at the search paperwork, generally entrance photos were taken on the first day. There was some searches done outside of the apartments, and then on the second day is when I think there was one item of evidence collected outside on day one. Day two is when we did most of the collection of the different shell casings, bullets.
Okay. When you were there on site in June of 2020, when you were with your team, did you all collect items that you just said throughout the apartment or inside? Where were items located?
There were two items collected outside, two shell casings. One was in front of apartment 4, one was in front of apartment 1, and then the rest of the items were collected from inside apartment 4.
Okay. Now, yesterday we heard from a local agent regarding LMPD's crime scene unit and how they perform methods of evidence response and collection. And they described things that the FBI does as invasive. Can you just describe how your search may be considered invasive?
For this search particularly, we cut into drywalls, large holes out of drywalls, which we typically do not, that's not something that we commonly do, but for this search specifically, we were looking for other items of evidence that may have been inside the wall.
Okay. Now, I'm going to show you what has been preliminarily marked as Commonwealth's Exhibits 129 through 139. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to have you take a look at these, and then I will show them on the screen in a second. Have you review those. I'll also give you a laser pointer here. Are those a fair and accurate depiction of the search that was conducted at 3003 Springfield Drive across the 2 days?
Yes.
And you were present for part of that search?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move to admit 129 through 139, and then I'll show them to the courtroom.
No objection.
All right, they'll be so admitted.
So I gave you the laser pointer if you need to point anything out, but not required. So in these photos that we'll start with Exhibit 129, what is this that we are looking at here?
So this is the room that we labeled as A, which it's I would call it maybe like the small dining area just outside the kitchen.
Okay. Are you familiar with what is on the other side of this wall that we're looking at?
I believe it's another apartment. It would have been apartment 3.
Okay. Okay. The area that is cut out, is that what you described earlier?
So the small area down by the cabinet, that was already cut out before we got there.
Okay. When we get to that point, please point out the FBI's. Okay. What is this?
So those are just 3 holes that are in the wall of room A.
Okay. And what is on the lower portion by what I would call the bumper?
A small hole that goes into the wall.
Okay. So is there a total of 4 holes?
Yes.
Okay. Just a close-up?
Yes.
Okay, Exhibit 131. Exhibit 132, is that?
Just a close-up.
Okay, now what are we looking at here in Exhibit 133?
So those are, and I wasn't part of this part of the processing of the crime scene. We had a unit that specializes in bullet trajectory work. They had deployed to Louisville for this part, but this just shows trajectory rods going into the wall.
Okay. And is that drywall that's been cut?
Yes.
Okay. What is this of?
So that shows room A going into room C being the kitchen, but it just shows the pieces of drywall that had been removed. Also, the trajectory rods going into the wall.
135, what are we looking at here?
So this is room K, which would have been, I would classify it as a spare bedroom.
Okay. And what task was FBI performing in this room?
This is just a picture of two holes going into, it's room K, but the adjoining wall would be room H, which is I would refer to the master bedroom.
Okay. And then it's just a picture of that wall in detail?
Yes.
136, 137, is this the same detail?
Yes.
And 138, is this back to wall A?
Yes.
And then, like you said, adjoining this or backing onto this, there's another apartment?
Correct.
Show you. What are we looking at here?
These are just different bullet fragments.
Okay. When the evidence response team responds to a scene and performs a search like they did in this case on those 2 days, what do you all do with any items collected?
So each item of evidence, in this case, I think we had 16 items of evidence. So each item is packaged and numbered, but packaged separately.
Okay. When you package them, are they sent to local or where are they sent?
It really just depends on what we're wanting to get from the item of evidence. In this case, I know several items of evidence were sent to our lab in Quantico.
Quantico, Virginia?
Correct.
Okay. After sending them off to Quantico, did your evidence response team have any further involvement with this apartment on 3003 Springfield Drive?
No.
In this case, the items that were taken from the scene, collected, and sent off to the lab included the bullets that we've previously discussed that were in that wall A. How many do you know were collected at the site?
I believe there were 14.
Okay. Do you know how many in the wall?
Just in the wall and from room A or total from the whole apartment?
Just the dining room.
So the dining room, there would have been just one item collected from that wall.
And then onto the bedroom?
So I know
FBI lab item 12 and 13, were those located there?
Okay, so I know, if I can go down the list, it may be easier. So item 1 was a shell casing found outside. Items 2 and 3 were the window and a screen from bedroom K. Item 4 was another shell casing that was found outside. Item 5 was pulled from a stud in the wall of room A. Item 6 and 7 were pulled from, item 6 was pulled from room E, which was a small closet. Item 7 was pulled from a stud in room C, which was the living area. Item 8 was pulled from the wall in room D, which was the hallway. Item 9 and 10 were pulled from the wall of room D, which was the hallway, at the end of the hallway in the wall. Item 11 was pulled from the hallway underneath the carpet pad. 12 was pulled from the stud in the wall of room H, which was the master bedroom. Items 13 and 14 were pulled from underneath the carpet in the hallway. And item 15 from the wall in room H, which was the master bedroom. And then 16 was from the wall from room J, which was the master bath.
All those items were sent to Quantico? Okay. Thank you, Agent Jones. I don't have any further.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Judge. Agent Jones, when you went to 3003 Springfield Drive on June 20th, 2020, do you know whether the two apartments were in the same condition they were on March the 13th, 2020?
The two apartments, no, I don't know. I don't know what the condition was like from March, because I wasn't a part of that.
Were there repairs that had been made to your knowledge?
I know the window from room K had been removed. It had been kept but removed, so we did reinstall. A member of our team did reinstall the window so we could process it.
And how about the walls? Have they been patched at all?
I'm not sure.
Okay. The bullets that you were just up on the screen there, 14 items that you recovered, you didn't do anything to compare those to anything? You just recovered them, correct? And you don't know what guns they came from or where they originated or anything else about them, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything else of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down. Thank you.
Bryce Ziegler.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
State your name, please.
My name is Bryce Ziegler. First name spelled Bryce. Last name spelled Ziegler.
Thank you. You've testified a lot.
A few times, yes.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation Laboratory Division within the Firearms and Toolmarks Unit,
Where is that located?
Quantico, Virginia.
And how long have you been in that position?
A little over 7 years now.
And what's your educational background?
I received a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Science from the Pennsylvania State University.
Do you have military service?
I do.
And what is that?
I was in the United States Marine Corps Reserves for an active time of about 6 years and inactive 2 years.
And were you deployed?
I was.
Where did you serve?
I deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2009.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Now, what kind of training did you get with the FBI to become a forensic examiner in firearms and tool marks?
So in this position, I had to complete the forensic examiner training program, which is specific to each unit within the FBI lab. When I first entered this program, I was given a training manual and I was assigned a mentor. So this mentor would monitor my progress in the manual, observe any tasks that I would complete. They would also supervise any casework that I worked on while I was still a trainee. As a culmination of this training program, I had to complete a series of practical competency tests, a series of oral boards, and a series of moot court exercises.
And how long did that training take?
It took a little over 3 years.
And have you been qualified to testify as an expert witness in the field of firearms and tool marks?
Yes, I have.
Judge, I will stipulate that Agent Ziegler is an expert in his field.
All right, thank you.
Were certain items submitted to you that were collected by agents that conducted a search in Louisville on June 19th and 2020,
Yes, they were.
from the 3003 Springfield Drive, apartments 3 and 4?
I would have to check the address.
Well, it's been testified by your,
I was not at the
Previous-
scene, so
you
if
were
that
not
is
there.
correct.
okay. Was one of those items submitted to you, item 19 on the FBI lab number, a Glock 40 caliber Model 2 pistol, Model 22 pistol?
Model 22, correct. Yes, it was.
And if you would pick up the box, the evidence box next to you there,
Yes.
if you could open that and examine the serial number and tell us, is that the gun that you examined that was sent to the lab at Quantico?
Yes, it is.
And can you verify that serial number?
Yes, the serial number is LMPD0256.
And is that the same serial number you recorded in your reports?
Yes, it is.
Now, were you asked to examine 3 bullets that had been retrieved during the search by the FBI on June 19 and 20, and compare those bullets to that gun to determine whether they had been fired from that gun?
Yes, I was.
Now, first of all, we've heard your counterpart with Kentucky State Police firearms examination describe that gun as having a rifling pattern, or describe it as having a polygonal rifling pattern of 6 hills and valleys that make a right twist. Did you examine the gun as well to determine what kind of rifling pattern?
Yes, I did.
And did you find the same pattern?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that is a 40 caliber.
That's correct. 40 Smith & Wesson is the...
What does caliber refer to? The diameter of the bullet or the diameter of the barrel?
It's both, actually. It's the approximate diameter of the barrel. So a 40 caliber cartridge is going to be designed specifically to be chambered in that particular pistol, so that the bullet is going to be the same approximate diameter, 0.4 inches.
So it's 0.4 inches diameter of the bullet,
Correct.
as well as the inside of the barrel.
Correct.
Okay. So now, referring to those 3 bullets that you examined that had been retrieved, item 3, according to your report, was a bullet retrieved from the stud in the dining room of apartment 4, which was referred to by the FBI personnel that collected it as room A. You have that in your report?
Yes, so the description that was given to me is bullet from wall in room A.
Okay, and that's item 3?
Correct.
And then the next bullet is item 12, according to your lab report, which was pulled from inside a wall in the south bedroom, which was described as room H
Correct.
on the FBI report.
Yes.
And then item 13 was also a bullet pulled out of the wall in the south bedroom, also room H.
Yes, that's correct.
And the jury has seen photos of the bullet defects in the wall of the south bedroom. What did you do in order to determine whether those 3 bullets had been fired from this Glock?
So the first thing that I had to do was actually take the firearm to a room in the laboratory which has a bullet recovery tank, which is a large water tank. So I actually had to collect test fires from the firearm by shooting it into the water and retrieving those projectiles. So those projectiles now become my knowns. Because I physically shot this firearm, I know they came from this gun. And the water takes away the energy of that bullet, and it drops to the bottom of the tank. So now I know when I look at that bullet under the microscope, the only marks I'm looking at came from the barrel, not because it hit a wall or a piece of plywood or some intermediate surface. So the first thing I had to do was collect my knowns from the firearm. I then would compare these knowns to the evidence items that were submitted in the case.
And how do you go about doing that comparison?
So the first thing I'm going to look at are the class characteristics. So these are some things we've already discussed. The rifling in the barrel, the number of lands and grooves, the rotation of those lands and grooves. Do they twist to the left? Do they twist to the right? As well as the caliber, so the approximate diameter of those bullets. So I'm going to look at all those things in the evidence items, compare them to the known bullets, and see if they are consistent or not. So that's the first part. So if they are consistent as far as caliber and the rifling pattern, I will then move to the second part of the examination where I put both bullets on what's called a comparison microscope. I'll mount them on a stage. I can see images of both of those bullets side by side when I look through a binocular eyepiece at the top. So I'm actually looking at the specimens side by side through the microscope. And what I'm looking at there is I'm looking for the random microscopic imperfections on those bullets, comparing the patterns of the striations that they picked up from the barrel, and trying to make a determination if there is sufficient agreement between those two specimens.
And what did you determine in regard to those 3 bullets, whether they had been fired from this Glock Model 22?
Yes, ma'am. I identified the item 3, 12, and 13 bullets as having been fired from the barrel of the item 19 pistol.
Which is the one you just showed us here.
Yes.
Now, at a point, when was that examination completed that you just described?
August of 2020.
Was there a time following August 2020 that you were asked to examine some additional bullets?
Yes, there was.
So if you would refer back to your report for that, second testing, was one of the bullets you were asked to examine item 29, and which was retrieved by Louisville Metro Police from the dining room floor of apartment 4.
Yes, so item 29 is just the jacket of a bullet. A bullet typically contains 2 components. The inside is going to be a lead core, and it can have a variety of different metals on the outside, but copper is a very common bullet jacket material. So in this case, the lead core had fallen out due to impact or for whatever reason, but I was still submitted an intact bullet jacket, which is still the portion that comes in contact with the barrel. So I was still able to use that for a comparison.
And what did you find when you compared it to your test fires from the Glock Model 22?
Using the same process, I identified the item 29 bullet jacket as having been fired from the barrel of the item 19 pistol.
Okay. And you did the same microscopic comparison. Even though this was a bullet jacket, you were still able to make the identification?
Yes, that's correct.
So you were able to find a marking or markings on the bullet jacket that were identical to your test fires?
I found there was sufficient agreement between the bullet jacket and the test fires.
Okay. Now, the second bullet that was submitted to you was item 26, which has been identified as previously by a previous witness and photograph as marker 47 found in the dresser drawer of the south bedroom of apartment 4. What did you find when you compared item 26 to this Glock?
I identified item 26 as having been fired from the barrel of the item 19 pistol.
Through the same method of comparison microscope?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, is there a minimum number of markings, microscopic markings? Is there a minimum number you need? 1, 3, 4, in order for you that are identical on both your test fire bullet and your evidence bullet? Is there a minimum number of microscopic markings that you need to be able to say, yes, this bullet was fired in this gun?
No, ma'am, there is not a minimum number of corresponding striations. It is my job to evaluate the bullet in its entirety, looking at all the information that is there on that specimen to reach a conclusion.
Now, on this particular bullet, were you aware that it had been previously tested by the Kentucky State Police firearms examiner who was unable to make a positive identification?
I was aware of that, yes.
But in your testing, you were able to make the identification?
Yes, I was.
Now, were you also asked to examine a second gun, a 9mm Glock 43X, which has previously been testified was retrieved from under the bed in apartment 4 in the south bedroom, and your lab identifies it as item 97.
Yes, I was.
And explain what type of gun that is.
This is another type of Glock pistol, but it's chambered in a different caliber. It's a 9mm Luger caliber as opposed to a 40 Smith & Wesson.
So 9mm bullet versus 40 caliber bullet.
Correct.
That's the two difference. Is 9mm bullet less diameter or greater diameter?
It is smaller than a 40 caliber. It's roughly 0.35 inches versus 0.40 inches.
Okay. Were you asked to compare item 38, which is a bullet retrieved from the breezeway outside apartment 3 and 4, previously testified by other witnesses, found next to marker 37 in the breezeway?
Yes.
Your item, FBI lab item 38.
Yes.
What did you find when you compared that bullet found in the breezeway to this 9mm gun found under the bed?
I identified the item 38 bullet as having been fired from the barrel of the item 97 pistol.
A Glock 9mm.
Correct.
And did you do the same method of comparison with the comparison microscopes?
Yes, I did.
Made a positive identification?
I made an identification, yes.
Yes. Okay. In addition to those tests, were you also asked to compare items 80 and item 80 and item 100? And what were those items?
Yes, I was asked to compare those, and they were two .223 Remington caliber fired cartridge cases.
And those were submitted as having been collected by the Office of Attorney General and by the FBI, which had retrieved it from a family member of Ms. Taylor.
Yes, that's correct.
And we've heard testimony that one of those, I think it may be item 80, that was submitted by the Office of Attorney General was provided by a witness that found it in the landscaping in front of apartment 4. What did you do with those two casings? And you said they were .223 caliber,
That's correct.
and those are rifle casings?
Typically, they're rifle cartridges, yes.
And what did you do? Did you have any gun to compare those to?
No, ma'am.
Nothing was submitted?
No.
So what did you do with those two casings?
I was asked to compare those two cartridge cases to each other to determine if they were or were not fired by the same firearm.
And what did you find?
I identified them as having been fired by the same firearm.
And how did you do that without a gun?
It's a similar process, I just don't have a known firearm to collect test fires, but I'm still going to compare those evidentiary cartridge cases using a similar process. I'm going to look at the class characteristics first. So for cartridge cases, these are different. These will be things like the firing pin shape, how the breech face looks, if there is a position of extractor ejector marks. So a variety of mechanism marks could be different between different firearms. So if those things are consistent between the two specimens, I will then again move to that more in-depth, higher magnification comparison stage on the comparison microscope.
So even though you didn't have a gun, you used a gun to do some test fires, or not?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you just compared the two casings. Now, of all of the bullets that were submitted to you for testing, and I think those were the only, those two casings you just testified about, those were the only casings submitted to you.
I received all of the cartridge cases, except I was only asked to examine these two. The rest, to my understanding, had been previously examined.
And of all the bullets and casings submitted to you for testing, other than the two rifle casings you just testified about and the 9mm bullet that you testified about, what caliber were all the other casings and bullets?
I would have to refer to my notes for the other cartridge cases because, again, I was not asked to examine those. But all of the bullets were able to be classified as either .40 caliber or 9mm.
And do you have your notes with you?
Yes.
Go ahead and refer.
This will be a fairly lengthy list. Items 39 through 66 and 74 through 79 are 40 caliber, 40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge cases. Items 67 through 73 are 9mm Luger caliber cartridge cases. Item 80 is one of the 223 Remington that we spoke about. And item 6 was an additional 9mm Luger cartridge case. Item 100 was the last 223 Remington cartridge case that we already spoke about.
So, and all of the bullets were 40 caliber other than the one 9mm bullet.
That is correct.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Ziegler, with reference to your items number 80 and 100, the 223 cartridge casings, do your notes reflect where they came from?
No, they do not. So sometimes in the lab, I'm not given that background information. I'm just told, here are 2 cartridge cases, examine them, formulate a conclusion. So in this case, that is not in my item listing.
Okay. What type of weapon would fire such a bullet?
It is commonly a rifle cartridge, commonly seen in AR-15s. Those types of firearms can also be in a pistol configuration, but it's a common rifle cartridge.
In your comparison, you didn't have an AR-15 to test fire and make any comparisons with, correct?
That is correct.
But you also were able to compare the 2 cartridges and determine they were fired from the same weapon, wherever that might be.
That is correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything on redirect? All right, you can step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not being admitted.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been going for about an hour and a half. Let's go ahead and take a break for 15 minutes. It's 11 o'clock, and we'll need to return at 11:15. Please remember the separation admonition.
All rise for the pardon of jury.
Sure. Okay, if you'll come on up, and counsel, if you'll come up, please. And you in the courtroom can be seated. All right, counsel, if you'll come forward, please. All right, are we ready to bring the jury back in?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, we're ready for the jury.
At this time, cell phones on vibrate and on silent, and all rise for the jury.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, anything to report from the break? All right, if the Commonwealth will call its next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, it's going to be Michael Van Arsdale.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Michael Van Arsel.
And how are you employed?
I'm currently employed as a physical scientist, forensic examiner with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically assigned to the Firearms Tool Marks Unit of the FBI Laboratory.
And where is that located?
That's located at Quantico, Virginia.
And how long have you worked in that role?
I've worked as a forensic examiner for approximately 7 years now.
Okay. And what training and experience did you receive to become in that role?
To become qualified as a forensic examiner in the Firearms Tool Marks Unit begins with the receipt of a comprehensive training manual. And this training manual will cover elements regarding firearms identification, tool mark identification, firearms manufacturing and development, ammunition manufacturing and development, as well as a portion of training regarding shooting incident reconstruction. That training for shooting incident reconstruction involves attending a school put on by the FBI Laboratory regarding shooting incident reconstruction, as well as attending multiple crime scenes, conducting shooting incident reconstruction with qualified examiners, gaining that hands-on experience at those multiple scenes. In addition, during my training, at the completion of my training, I was tested both in written form and oral form, and I was also provided a series of competency tests, including looking at a vehicle that had been shot and trying to establish the trajectories based on the holes in that vehicle. And my documentation of those trajectories as well as the measurements were evaluated to establish my competency.
And what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Michigan.
Your Honor, I will stipulate that Mr. Van Arsdale is an expert in his field.
Thank you.
At some point in your role with the FBI that you just described, were you assigned to the case that is encompassing 3003 Springfield Drive here in Louisville, Kentucky?
Yes, I was.
And what role did you play in that?
It was my job to travel to the scene and conduct shooting incident reconstruction.
And was that in June of 2020?
That is correct.
And when you arrived at that scene, what did you do?
I traveled to the scene with a team of individuals from the laboratory. So I have, in order to conduct the shooting incident reconstruction, the team consists of myself, a forensic examiner, a firearms examiner, a photographer, a graphic artist, and a member of our evidence response team from the laboratory. It was my role on the scene to evaluate the location, looking for any holes and impacts, and then to try and associate those holes and impacts to establish a trajectory, to try and determine where did the bullets travel to and where did they come from. I have a photographer, as I mentioned, that travels with me to document those holes and impacts and the trajectories, as well as a graphic artist to document the position of those holes and impacts within that scene so that graphics can be created to support my report.
And were you there the days in June of 2020 when this team performed a search of that apartment?
Yes, I was.
And were you part of the team that also performed then the trajectory analysis?
Yes, I was.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has already been admitted into evidence, some photos. Have you take a look at these. Are these a fair and accurate depiction of the search team and then the analysis that you performed?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I'm just going to go through a few of these with you, particularly those containing this wall that we see here. What room is that in?
So this was identified as room A within apartment number 4, designating this as a dining area of that apartment.
On the opposite side of this wall, what is there?
This wall adjoins apartment 3, and so it would be the dining area of apartment 3.
Okay. What is this picture?
This is a photograph prior to me beginning my analysis. The photographer would document the condition as we arrive on scene, and this photograph depicts the area that I will be working on.
Okay. And when you say work, what encompasses your work?
What I'm doing is I'm going to be looking for any indications of passage of a bullet or impact from a bullet. And so I'm looking for any holes or impacts that would be indicative of that bullet impact or strike.
What is this photo right here, 131?
These are going to be close-ups of 2 of the bullet holes that were located within that wall.
Are you able to gain any information from the bullet holes that are pictured here in this wall?
Looking at the characteristics of these holes, I'm looking at the edges of this, looking to determine if I can tell directionality. If the bullet passed through this, which way was it going? And based on the physical characteristics of these holes, I was able to determine that the bullets entered through this wall towards apartment number 3.
Is this just another close-up exhibit 132?
Yes.
Now, what is seen here in exhibit 133?
So, in this exhibit, this is a photograph of the trajectory rods that I used. Now, the rod is a metal rod that I can insert into that bullet hole to show the approximate path of the bullet. And so during my analysis, I used multiple rods, inserted into these holes, and tried to connect to holes on the back wall. Now, this scene was different in that that back wall had been repaired. An individual had gone through and filled those holes on that back wall. And so you'll see very large holes in the wall, large square holes in the wall. Those are what are called witness panels. I had to cut large holes within the wall so I could see when I inserted that rod through the hole, where did it go? And what I found on the interior of the wall was the location of the hole, the other hole. So as that bullet passed through the first piece of drywall, it then passed through a second piece of drywall into the neighboring apartment. I could see where that repair had been made and where that hole was located.
So you're able to still establish 2 points of contact?
That's correct. I used on the inside of the wall, the center portion of that hole to establish 2 points, and those 2 points then established that trajectory. That gave me the path of that bullet through the wall, giving me the vertical angle and as well as the horizontal angle.
Now, there's a difference in colors. What do those colors mean?
The rods that I use are of different diameters. The yellow rods are slightly larger diameter than the pink rod that you see in the bottom. That pink rod, that particular hole behind the drywall was a wood 2x4. Now that bullet passed through the drywall and then through that 2x4. Now the wood for a 2x4, when a bullet passes through wood, sometimes that wood will open up to allow the passage of the bullet, but then shrink back down. And so I used a smaller diameter to follow the path of that bullet through that 2x4. It was easier to move that smaller diameter than to use one of the larger diameter yellow rods.
Now, we've previously had the FBI testify that a stud was pulled out of the wall. Where is that located in this picture?
Behind the trajectory, Your Honor, may if I...
There's a laser pointer up there, if you need it.
Behind the trajectory here, this impact, this hole led to an impact within a stud inside that wall. Within that impact was a bullet.
And that's the bullet that was taken to Quantico and tested?
Yes, that's correct.
What is this picture of?
This is another angle showing the dining area and the trajectories within the wall that I established.
And those are the same rods and holes that you performed?
That is correct. And you'll see my numbering, my labeling next to each one of those rods.
Okay. This picture right here?
This was a picture of the holes that I had identified on the interior of apartment 4, the witness panels that I had cut, and this is prior to the insertion of the trajectory rods.
Now, I'm also going to show you a floor plan that's already been admitted into evidence. This floor plan, what are we looking at here?
This is the layout of the apartments within this complex.
Okay? What is the location where you were going through the studs and the wall of your analysis?
This layout appears to be the layout of apartment 3, so the neighboring apartment. The analysis that I was conducting would have been in this dining area here.
Okay. Now that you've gone over that, were you able to perform any trajectory analysis based on the rods that you placed in that wall?
The trajectory analysis that I conducted based on the rods, insertion of the rods into the wall from apartment 4 to the interior of the holes within the wall of apartment 3, I was able to establish trajectory for 4 rods the trajectories originating from the southeast direction through apartment 4.
Okay. And were you able to put those findings into a diagram?
Yes, the graphic artist that traveled with me that documented the scene created a diagram to support my report.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you, this has not been admitted yet. It's marked as Commonwealth Exhibit 140. Have you take a look at this. What are we looking at here?
This is the diagram, one of the diagrams that was created by that graphic artist to support my report. And what you will see on this diagram.
I'll bring it up in just a second. What I was going to ask you next, the diagram that we're about to see, the analysis that you just went over for that wall, was that analysis performed throughout the apartment in this case?
Yes, it was.
And was all that analysis documented and reported in the diagram that we're about to see?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would move to admit 140, and I will show it on the screen.
No objection.
All right, it'll be so admitted.
Now, please, with the diagram, explain your findings.
So the photos that we looked at earlier were of this area here, this wall associated within room A. And this wall is the shared wall to apartment 3. You will see along that wall 4 holes that are marked in blue and 3 holes marked in blue on the interior of the wall. There's a green impact marked on the wall. I was able to establish trajectories for establish 4 trajectories for each of these holes and impacts originating from a southeast direction.
And what direction were they traveling in? From the southeast to?
They were traveling from the southeast into apartment 3, with the exception of the one that terminated within the stud.
Okay. The other lines throughout this diagram, obviously the ones that you've documented here, are those documenting all the other trajectories that you performed of other directions occurring in this case?
The yellow lines represent the trajectories that I established based on bullet holes and impacts. Other than the one that could not be graphically depicted, they represent all the trajectories that I established, yes.
Okay. The ones that you just spoke of on that wall, and the ones that you've documented in that going down from the southeast to the northeast direction, at the time that you were in the apartment, what would have been located from their trajectory?
The trajectories that I established would have originated from the direction of a sliding glass door on the opposite wall of that apartment.
And then just to touch one last time on those other lines that we see going in, I guess, a west to east pattern, those would have originated based on your analysis here, and where would they have been located?
The origin of the trajectories moving along the hallway would have originated from the direction of that door.
Okay. And what door is that?
That would be the main entrance door to the apartment 4.
And based on your diagram here, there was never a origin of trajectory located anywhere in the common area living room.
Did not establish an origin within the common area of the living room.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have any further questions.
Cross-examination?
Thank you. Sir, what is your proper title, agent?
No, sir. It's a physical scientist, forensic examiner.
Okay. I'm going to just call you Mr. Van Arsdale, okay?
Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. In your examination of apartment 4, did you determine a trajectory for any bullets that went through the ceiling?
Yes, I did.
And how many were those?
There were 2 trajectories through the ceiling.
Where did those originate, if you know?
They originated from the direction of the front door.
And where did they end up, if you know?
One of those went through the apartment above apartment 4 and exited out the roof of the building. And the other one entered into the apartment above and possibly terminated within an object within that apartment.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down, thank you. Commonwealth's next witness?
May we approach?
You may. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch, and then when we come back at 1 o'clock, we will be then ready to go on our scene visit. But Deputy Sheriff Anthony will give you some directions regarding where you go from lunch. And then we'll all gather together and leave together to go for the visit to the scene. So please remember the separation admonition, and have a nice lunch, and I will see you back here at 1 o'clock.
All rise for the